Welcome. These are actually our Halloween costumes. We are pretending to be mystery authors, and Chris is not pretending to be a mystery author. At these things, I always find it kind of silly to do long introductions of everybody. So I'm going to sort of go down the line and talk to each of these people whom I barely know. Actually, they're all very close friends of mine, and I'm very happy that they agreed to do this. They think they're getting paid. Okay, so Matt, one of the interesting things about this group is we all came at this from very different areas, not geographically, yes, but also from different backgrounds. So Matt, are you a native Minneapolis person?
Yeah.
But you Minnesotan?
Yeah.
But you moved around a lot too, didn't you?
I did.
Why was that?
My dad kept getting transferred.
He was a Sears
He
Roebuck
worked for
man,
Sears.
right?
Yeah. Back when Sears was something. And
Yeah.
now it's nothing. Not
Yes.
because of my dad.
Yes, he single-handedly.
Single-handedly drove it into the ground.
Yes, and Megan, you are from Detroit, right?
That's right. Yep.
But a very fancy part of Detroit.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Well,
We weren't fancy. We lived near the freeway, but the town was fancy.
Grosse Pointe, if you've ever heard of Grosse Pointe, Megan's from Grosse Pointe, and your dad was a college professor?
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Downtown, yeah.
That's right. And are you the only one on this panel that has a PhD? I think so. All right, you can leave. Now, who's that sitting next to you? Is that Chris?
Yes.
Chris Pepe. For how long were you an editor at Putnam?
32 years.
And I drove her out. She was my editor for what, 8 years? Yeah. And she was by far the best editor I've ever had, and taught me a lot about the business. And we'll get to that later. But Chris is a native Long Islander.
That is true.
From close by.
Yes,
actually.
from very close by.
Yes.
Went to Cold Spring Harbor High School. I see one of my teachers, Miss Skolnick, 7th grade social studies.
Did you hand in all your assignments?
I did.
Maybe here to,
We didn't want to get a minus in her class. So.
And Charles Salzberg over there started out as a nonfiction writer. Actually, Charles, you went to law school for a year, right?
Yeah, the worst year of my life. Yeah. I knew the first day I was leaving.
And that was where, in Boston?
Yeah.
Yeah.
BU.
And
all the Harvard guys and who wanted to be lawyers and couldn't get into Harvard, they all went to BU.
Yeah. And Charles started out writing nonfiction, right, Charles? Oh, actually, Charles, tell the story about how you started in the writing program at Columbia and what your teacher told you about your first book.
Yeah, I had my first real job was in the mailroom at New York Magazine, and I went to get an MFA in writing, creative writing, and the guy interviewed me. He's dead now, so I can't go after him. But he actually had a really bad reputation, and I know 2 people who fired him from work. Anyway, I needed a manuscript to get in, and I gave the manuscript, and I met with the head of the program, and she said, "Oh, you got a really good reading." But then when I met with him, he said, "You're here by the skin of your teeth. Do you know how to tell a story?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." He said, "Well, you write that Dostoevsky, Nabokov, Philip Roth kind of psychological crap. You should read some things with stories like Chekhov." And I just kept my mouth shut. I'd read Chekhov and quit the next day. So I had the shortest MFA career ever.
And
then I became a magazine journalist, then nonfiction book writer. Then I've done all kinds of writing.
Yes. And there's Tom Straw, lonely Tom Straw at the end.
I'm all alone at the end.
He's like the Maytag repairman of writers.
The loneliest writer
Fresh
in town.
reference.
Yes. Yeah. Keep it up, Matt. No questions for Goldman. So Tom and Matt both come from the TV comedy writing world, actually. So I'll start with Tom. Tom, do the quick list of shows you've written and been the showrunner for.
Okay, Night Court, the first one. I was a writer and producer on that. And let's see, what else did I get fired from? No, I didn't. I wasn't on that. I didn't get fired. I quit. And let's see, I did a bunch of shows for Carsey Werner. I did Grace Under Fire. It's kind of tough to mention now. I did Cosby. I was his head writer for 2 years. No, I never saw a thing. And Whoopi, and more recently, Nurse Jackie. So, oohs and ahs from the audience. I like that.
Well,
Can I
Edie's.
just add something really quick?
Sure.
Because we bonded when I was doing journalism. I did a lot of celebrity profiles, and I did a profile of this woman, Brett Butler, Grace Under Fire. And there was a story around that she once threw a can of Coke at one of her writers. And when I met Tom and I knew that he worked on it, I just said, oh, she told me this story. She was a great interview, by the way, because she'd answer anything. I was supposed to ask her about, now this is a woman who was in a almost fatal car crash. Her husband took a shot at her with a rifle in their trailer and missed. She had a terrible drug and alcohol problem. And the magazine wanted to know, she had breast implants, and they wanted to know if she was ever worried about the health implications of breast implants. And so you journalists, you wait to the end for those kind of questions. And I asked her, and she said, honey, wouldn't it be funny and ironic if my tits, after all I've been through, if my tits killed me? So, but anyway, Tom turned out, when I met him, he was the writer that she threw the can of Coke at. And the first thing I asked him was it empty or full? And he said, full.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, but I said, you missed. So, but she didn't.
But tell him just to tell when you came to your office the next day, who was there for you.
Oh, okay. So, yes, she threw a can of Coke at me on set in front of the audience and everything. It was very embarrassing. But, one of those Hollywood stories that I dine on often. And I came into work, that was on a Friday night, and I go into work on Monday, and I go into my office, and there's a guy sitting on the couch in my office in a members only jacket and kind of like really groomed and all that. And he said, hi, Tom, I'm Frank Nadello. I'm your bodyguard. And I said, what? He goes, yes, I'm a retired LA County Sheriff, and the studio asked me to be your bodyguard because of what happened. And I said, okay. And I said, okay, we were going to go to the table reading for the next episode. And I said to him, Frank, listen, she's volatile, and she's one of those creatures who knows everything that's happening in a room at all times. So don't be obvious. I don't want to upset her. And he goes, oh, don't worry, Mr. Straw. I'll see her, but she won't see me. So one of those great Hollywood moments.
How many cans of Coke did it take for you?
None. But I did have to say, I can go into the men's room alone. I did say that to him.
Welcome to the Charles Salzberg and Tom Straw shows.
Wrestle it back, Reed.
Yeah, so now Matt has a few minor comedy writing credits to his. We want to get this out of the way now, so you can ignore the rest of us and just pay attention to Tom and Matt. So Matt,
These people like books.
no, they don't. They
right.
just pretend to like books. We'll get to the book stuff. I want to clear this, and then we'll get to Megan's TV writing career. So, who did you write for? What TV shows have you written for?
I'm not going to list them all, but Seinfeld, Ellen, The New Adventures of Old Christine, The Weirdest Show Ever, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, super weird. A show called Love and War that was on a very long time ago. That was on for 3 years, but I don't think anybody watched it. And what else did I write on? I didn't know. That's Tom.
That's Tom.
But the books, a lot of shows.
Yes. Okay. And okay, Abbott, spit it out. Come on.
I wrote for my own show. Yeah, I was a showrunner on a show adapted from one of my books called Dare Me. You can watch it on Netflix. And since then, I've been working mostly. Oh, and I also worked on The
The
Deuce
Deuce.
on HBO, the David Simon show about pornography, now, yeah, I've been mostly working in development, which is like anyone who's ever spent any time in Hollywood knows what that means. It means you spend years pounding your head against the wall trying to get something greenlit, but they have to pay you. Working on a couple projects now, but no comedy.
Yes.
Come on.
Yes. All right. Now we've got that out of the way. Questions from the audience. Let me start with Charles. Charles, how did you get to be a mystery writer? Because we are now, except for Chris, mystery writers. And Chris, you know what, Chris? Let me ask you this question. Now, I was a bestseller, but how many bestsellers were you the editor for? I mean, the list is long.
I counted before I left, and it was, I know this is going to sound crazy, but it was over 200 titles.
Wow.
But I worked for Putnam, which then kind of was swallowed by Penguin, and we had a lot of authors who wrote one book a year. Some of them wrote 2 and 3 books a year, and so you could see how the numbers would go up.
Yeah, but some of the names other than mine that these people might know.
Sure. Jan Karen, Robert E. Parker, Dick Francis, Ridley Pearson, Nevada Barr, Laurel Spencer. I don't know if anyone remembers her. Lawrence Sanders. There's another name from the crypt.
Okay, so Charles, how did you become a mystery writer, and why a mystery writer? You had a pretty successful career as a nonfiction writer. Why mystery?
Well, first of all, fiction, because I didn't have to leave the house, especially if it was bad weather. I always wanted to write fiction, and I did, but I couldn't make a living at it. And it goes back to that MFA program. When I quit, he got me so upset that I thought, I'm going to write a novel that's going to be so much story, so plotted that he'll never be able to say that again. And so I thought, well, the most plotted things really are mysteries. You have to be very carefully plotting of it.
I did make the right choice because I was in the Columbia MFA program too.
Oh, were you?
But I did stick it out. But you're the one who's published it, not me. So
You're still here.
I'm still here. True.
Anyway, so it was really on a dare. I screwed it up by in that novel. No one would take it because in the end they liked it, but in the end the detective is not really he's a skip tracer, which is the lowest form I think of that kind of stuff. I hope there are no skip tracers here that I've said that about. Anyway, I had this idea. I was going to go through all these. He was going to follow all the clues. And at the end, he would not solve the crime because it was random. The reader would find out who did it and why. And they all said, no, you can't. The fans want the protagonist to solve the crime. And I was really young and stupid and had principles. And I said, well, then I'm not changing it. And 25 years later, I came across it, read it again, and said, this isn't so bad. Maybe publishing has changed. And I gave it to an editor that I worked with on a true crime book, and he read it and he loved it. And he said, I can't publish it with this ending. So I changed the ending. So that's what I learned in 25 years is how to sell out.
Yeah, you learn to sell out.
Yeah, exactly. And then I got the last laugh because the paperback edition has both endings in it. So you can see my original ending and that one. So it was on a pretty much a dare to myself that I started writing crime.
So Abbott, how did you come to this?
As you know, Reed, we discussed this before.
Yeah, well, first let me tell you, about 20 years ago, I was at Roseanne, my wife, and I were at a party in Morningside Heights.
Yes.
and I saw my wife was over chatting with. My wife really likes writers much more than I do, and she has many more writer friends than I do. This is about it for me, by the way. And I saw this woman sitting alone on the couch having a beer, and I walked over, and we didn't know each other, and within 5 minutes we were discussing Raymond Chandler,
Yeah.
and
And
we've
we're
been
s-
friends
we're still
ever-
discussing
right,
Raymond Chandler or whatever we
Yeah,
mean.
but
Yeah.
how did you come?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I was always interested in true crime, but as a reader, but it really was when I was in graduate school, I discovered the hard-boiled novels of the 30s and 40s, foremost Raymond Chandler, his Philip Marlowe novels. I just fell in love with them, and you know. And it's it's a rejection of what you just said, Charles, because the plot is not the reason you read a Raymond Chandler novel, because the mysteries never actually quite make sense.
Who killed the
Uh,
chauffeur?
Yes, exactly. You read them for their style, for their character, for the voice, and I just was entranced by him, and all those books were so wonderful. Dashiell Hammett and James M. Cain, but there were never any women in them. Or they weren't. If there were in there, they weren't in there for long.
They didn't live long.
Right. So I thought, well, maybe I'll write one with the woman as the center. She's the protagonist of the story, and that's really what got me going.
And how many books in are we now?
12.
Yeah.
It seems crazy.
And women are almost always at the center of
Yes.
it, and they're great books. By the way, if you haven't read any of these people, you absolutely should, because you're not going to be allowed out of here. No, you absolutely should. These people are here not only because they're my friends, but because they're all excellent writers and all different from each other, which is one of the things that I think mystery gets lumped in as this one sort of thing, and it's a million things. It's like when people say, why do you write about New York? Well, because New York isn't one place, it's 1,000 places. So even Long Island is, at least 3 places. So Tom Straw, how did you come to be here? And don't say the ferry from
I was just saying
Connecticut.
25A.
Mhm.
No, I still do television. So, it's not as if I left a career to do books. In fact, my most recent book is in the same development machinery that Megan was discussing and all the fun that goes with it. But I always I was always a reader, always a very big reader. And even writing sitcom, my viewing habits were really more toward like Hill Street Blues or Rockford Files and shows like that. And so connecting to the Coke can incident, when I moved east and I decided I wanted to write novels too, I thought, well, I'll use that incident as a roman à clef for a book. And so it got well received and published by a house that was sold to a German company shortly after publication, and they only wanted the nonfiction catalog. So there was going to be no sequel, there was going to be no promotion for it. But my publisher / editor ended up the editor-in-chief at Hyperion, which was owned by ABC Disney. And he took me to lunch one day and he said, there's a show coming on called Castle. And your characters in this book that you just wrote are a lot like Beckett and Castle. Would you consider ghostwriting a one-off, just kind of like a gimmick book, as if you were Richard Castle? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And well, it went, I'll shorten the story and just say there were 7 of them. They all were New York Times bestsellers. One of them went to #1. And I didn't have 200, but 7 was, 7 felt like enough. I thought, I'm going to just lay off.
And Tom
so-
did buy thousands of copies of that book, by the way.
Yes, that's right.
And you can buy them from him at a steep discount. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, that was my intro to, or my entree to publication.
Yeah. So you still have your toes in both.
Yes,
Thanks.
yes, I do.
And Megan too. Megan, your book came out in May. When did-
June, yeah.
June, Eldorado.
Eldorado Drive, which is in development now with 824.
Yes. And Goldman, you're unlike Tom. you come from the comedy world and really don't want to go the comedy writing world. Do you really think of yourself now as a mystery writer?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Why?
Why do I think?
No, I know you.
Oh,
Why?
why do I
I've read your
write them?
books.
Okay.
I've read your books, so
Okay.
yeah.
No, I started writing television comedy when I was 24, and was doing it. I did it for a very long time, and I was starting to not like the direction TV comedy was going. When comedy, comedy is about our flaws, mostly our traits that we're not proud of, and when we watch a show like Seinfeld, we see ourselves in those characters. People say that show is about nothing. I think it's about selfishness. They're the most selfish characters on the planet. So we understand those selfish impulses. Most of us are smart enough not to act on them. On the show, they acted on them, which makes it so funny. But it's a very human thing, and that's the part I liked. And when the dramas got crazy good, the second golden age of TV with The Wire and Breaking Bad and House of Cards, all of a sudden TV became was the coolest thing in Hollywood, and it had never been so before. It had always been, you want to work in film, and if you can't work in film, then you can work in TV. But those shows, along with some changes in the movie business itself, kind of flipped that, and everybody was talking about the dramas, and many people still are talking about the dramas. What are you watching? What are you streaming? Those conversations happen all the time. But it was all drama, and comedy felt left out, so they tried to make comedy cool like the dramas, but comedy is not cool. Like if you look at the great comedic characters, Ralph Cramden on The Honeymooners, that guy was not cool. Fraser Crane, not cool. George Costanza, Lucy, they're all idiots, but we love them because they're like us. So anyway, I thought I'm going to move to drama because that's what I'm watching. And I'd always been a huge reader, but I was kind of a literary fiction snob. I don't know why. And I started reading crime fiction because I thought, I'll work on a cop show. And what I found in crime fiction was the last thing I expected, which is it has that same humanity as comedy. And a lot of the reason is because there's a built-in engine to the story. When there's a missing person or a dead body, clues are coming in, the phone's going to ring and they're going to say, we got the prints off the gun or whatever it is. And it just pushes things forward and it frees up some space for your characters to just be people. And you can focus on them and their relationships.
So one of the reasons I asked you to be here is that I think a lot of people, even really intense and dedicated readers, they don't understand the business. And believe me, publishing is a bit of a crazy business because it changes all the time. Like 2 weeks ago, publishing changed for the worse. Maybe not for all of the people here, but for a lot of writers. A publishing house that published a lot of people who had slipped through the cracks of the big publishing houses closed. It just shut its doors. And that many of you won't even have known this publisher, but a lot of, like I spoke to my friend Tom Schreck today, who had a book scheduled to be released by this company, and now it's gone. So, and Baker and Taylor, one of the big book distributor to libraries, is either closing or closed. So in 1 week, that happened. Whose piano?
That's sad music because you're telling a sad story.
Yes. Right. And so,
This panel's
but
been
I
scored.
don't think people appreciate or understand the process it goes through. So one of the that was good timing, by the way, Robin. Chris, can you explain? I mean, I know you haven't been at Putnam for a few years, but at least when I came to Putnam, what the process was like on your side of things, like
You mean in terms
of
of
getting a manuscript,
Right.
and
right? Well, from the very beginning, like from the minute you receive a manuscript as an editor, like that is the beginning of trying to remind all parties that it is a business, and that as much as we editors may love a project, there are also these other people on the finance side who want the book to make money. And, you know, I may see the book as something amazing and needs to be out in the world, and the financial people might see it as a nice book that is going to sell 11 copies. And
I thought we weren't going to talk about my career.
So from the outset, you're doing an estimate on what you think the book can sell, even before anything actually happens. I mean, in the bigger picture, publishers can take gambles on smaller books because they have bigger books. And when I use small and large here, I'm talking about in terms of sales. I mean, publishers recognize that writers need a place to start, and not everyone is going to be a huge bestseller from the very beginning. And that, you know, a good publisher can be a home for a writer and nurture their talent and take the time to see them grow, even if it means that they're not necessarily making money right away, but somehow all parties can agree to see a future. But, you know, sometimes it doesn't work out that way, or sometimes publishers are too rash and cut people loose before they've had the chance to really grow. And it's hard as an editor, I think, because, you know, you may find something and someone that you absolutely adore, you love working with them, you see the audience, you see the good reviews, but somehow it's not translating into sales. And you may get the word that, like, no, you're going to have to turn down the next book. Another thing, and this has really developed even more since I left the big 5 publisher, there are different things that are driving what makes books successful now. And, you know, book review sections have either in newspapers and magazines have shrunk or disappeared. I mean, entire newspapers have disappeared and entire magazines have disappeared. So the way that people discover books, it gets tougher and tougher. I mean, you hear about, you know, book talk on TikTok and how that has driven sales. But the difficult part always for us, I felt, was how do you solve the problem of discoverability? How do you find your audience? What's the best way to meet them, to be able to tell them a little something about the book? If you don't have reviews, for example, you can't afford to do ads, or there are no places to put the ads anymore. And I don't know.
I sent her here. I invited her here to cheer everybody up.
No, I can say cheerful things too, because I also had, I mean, I worked with people who were established bestsellers who were kind of trying to just maintain the status quo and hope that every book would still hit all the right notes, satisfy readers, and keep repeating and maintain the sales. But there are also really good stories of people that you started out as, you know, debut authors with like a 5,000 copy print run, and over time they became New York Times bestsellers. And someone that I worked with, it was the first book I ever acquired, so it was a really long time ago, and I recently found out that the series is being turned, the book series is being turned into a TV series. So, and that's Nevada Bar.
Oh, Nevada Bar.
And for years, she writes a series about a national park ranger. And initially, one of the problems with trying to get her on the screen was that, you know, in the books, because of the nature of her particular position, she moved from park to park. And the idea of doing something like that was very expensive. And now the answer is, as it is in so many cases, Canada. And I think it's all going to be filmed in Canada. And I think that they're going to establish her as a more permanent you know,
Yeah.
I mean, among all the other things that tend to
So-
get changed.
So, Matt,
Mhm.
editors, how many editors have you had since you started? Like, how many books have you published and how many editors have you had?
I've had 8 books out. They're all with the same editor. Another one's coming in April with that editor, and there will be the 10th one I'm writing now with that editor. But I do have, and now this year and next year are weird. I have 2 books out this year, 3 next year. So there are some other editors.
Volume.
I don't know how to do anything else. I have now worked with a couple more editors, but I really have this one long my first book was edited by someone named Christine Pepe at Macmillan. Used to be Tor Forge, now it's Minotaur, because she moved. But so yeah, I'm doing my 10th book with her right now.
Megan, how many? 12 books, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, wow. So who's your editor now?
Daphne Durham at Putnam.
And
Yes.
you know, what's your relationship like with her?
It's great. Yeah, I've had 4 editors. Just because editors move houses a lot in publishing. But I've loved working with them all. And you know, they all have different approaches. Some are more hands-on. Some, you know, the experienced ones tend to be more hands-off. In my experience, they give big picture notes and trust you to do the rest. The younger ones can be very,
Really?
yes.
They should go work in TV.
You know, they trust you to figure out. They point out what the issues are for them and trust you
So-
to figure out.
So now whatever your next book is, and I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
do you go to her and say, this is what I'm thinking of doing,
No.
or do you just write the
I
book?
just
and-
write the book.
Yeah.
I've never done a book on proposal.
And Straw,
Yeah.
you still
What?
with us down
What?
there? I can't see you. So you got the Margaret, hold up the book.
Oh, yes, the Accidental Joe.
You knew the editor, right? You had previously
Yeah, well,
known
you
the
know,
editor.
I've had 10 books out. First editor was Will Balliet, who was at the company that folded, but he went to Hyperion, and he introduced me to Gretchen Young, who became my editor for all the Castle books, and was the editor of the one that you just held up. You know, stick with who you came with, right? If it's a good relationship, you know, smart notes, not too many of them, good listener, good exchange, good taste, and somebody you like to have a conversation with.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to hear Charles's comments on editor. Charles, give us the full story about your relationship with the various editors you've had, including the nonfiction. Charles, how many nonfiction books did you write before you started writing?
Well, if you count ghostwriting and collaborating, maybe over 30. It sounds obnoxious that I don't know, but I don't. And then my 10th novel or 10th crime novel will be published in the summer. So I've had a lot of editors over the years.
So do you have a favorite? Do you have a least favorite?
I have a least.
You don't have to name them.
No.
but-
Well, that would be the fun part of it, is to name them. I had one that was really horrible at Viking, and she was really passive aggressive, and the others I always get along with them. So I haven't had any. I really haven't had clashes with editors or magazine editors are very different, because especially if you write for the women's magazines, they what I call group edit. So you'll go in and they'll show you an edited piece, and there's like 6 different handwritings on it. And they'll ask for changes, and then you make the changes. And this has happened to me many times. And then they think, no, we actually liked the way you did it the first time. So those editors are sort of justifying their job. But I honestly have never had a clash except for this one editor who I think now may be an agent. I think she's out of that.
Well, my favorite my favorite editor is sitting over there. She made me a much better writer. I think that's the test, is whether your editor makes you a better writer, and you know it. I've had a lot of editors, I've had a lot of agents, but Chris made me a better writer, and not by pounding me over the head either. Well, first of all, we get along, and I think that helps.
Absolutely.
If you like the person who's editing you, because when I would get the notes, and generally Chris was really good about the notes, not real heavy-handed, except for one book. It wasn't heavy-handed. It was, I had to take a character out of a book. It was which one? Oh, the Hangman's Sonnet. I had to take. It was a Jesse Stone book, not one of mine. It was a Parker book, and you read it and you said, this character's got to go. It was a girlfriend of Jesse's, and I spent the summer actually. It was interesting because it was like taking a single color thread out of a garment, which is really hard to do. But you were right to tell me to do it. But that was the only kind of heavy, hard thing you ever had me do.
It's interesting, Reed, what happens between television and books. In television, you tend to get feedback like, what the hell were you thinking? Or anything but this. Whereas with an editor, my experience and those I've talked to about it, you tend to get the comments in the form of a question. Have you ever thought that maybe it would help this asshole? You do get a much, pardon me for that, but you get a much more collegial experience. It's respectful, and if it's working, it's all about what's in front of us. How can we make this work? And so the conversations tend to be much more kind.
But the other thing, just to pick up on what Chris said in terms of editing, my name is on the book, and if I screw up, I'm the one who gets blamed. But a good editor, let's say like Chris, who makes it better, she's doing me a favor. She's making me look good, or any other editor. So I think it's really important to have good editors, and you don't have to agree with everything they say. And most good editors will at least get into a conversation with you, and either you'll talk them into why you shouldn't make a change, or vice versa. My limited experience with film, because I had a screenplay that I wrote with a friend that was optioned like 4 times. But you get things like, I never get this in book. I actually got someone in creative who said, we love this story, but could you change the main character from a woman to a man? And I thought, what do they think? It's just, I'm going to do a universal search and change Jane to John. It doesn't work that way, and so I found they did. And another one, I swear this is true, said, I saw this movie the other night, and I think the ending of that movie would work well for your movie. Wanted me to steal. That would never happen, in my experience, that would never happen in publishing world. Maybe it does, because maybe you'll tell me I'm wrong, but I haven't experienced that.
I never saw that either, but what you said about like asking for some crazy change, like basically, I always felt that if I am not seeing the book in a similar way to the author, there's something very wrong, and I would automatically assume it was me. Like I can't imagine working on a book where I felt so much was wrong. That's just not the right kind of working relationship. And I would only want to make suggestions that I thought would make the book better, meaning that it is already starting from a good place. And especially sometimes with younger writers, you do have to remind them that, look, ultimately you get the final say, but I'm only suggesting this not to prove that I did some work on it, but just because I think it's going to help amplify the point that you're trying to make here. But again, like if I just can't connect with it, or my brain is telling me to go left and the author wants to go right, maybe it's just not the right match. It's not fair. It's not fair to the author, really. You're dealing with a totally different idea.
Megan, have you ever had a male editor?
No, but my agent's usually my first reader, so I do the first edit I get is from my agent, who was a man for most of my books.
And did you ever feel? I know we all know him, but did you ever feel he didn't get what you were getting at because he was a man, or did you ever have a big disagreement with him based on that, or did you ever have a big disagreement with him about what he wanted, what he thought should change?
The latter, yes. The former, no. I mean, I want men and women to read my books, and there's all kinds of men and women anyway. So I feel like I don't think in terms of gender.
No. I mean,
yeah.
I've read your books. I mean,
Yeah, that's
I
what
just,
mean.
I was just.
But it can be useful. For instance, some women often communicate differently, often more passive aggressively, say, and sometimes there would be things going on that he wouldn't be quite aware of what was going on in the scene, because women operate with one another very differently than men operate with one another. Huge stereotypes, but I think it's true by and large. So he often wouldn't know that there was something was going on that wasn't. But we many times disagreed because he was a very aggressive editor as an agent. And I had to tell him that he couldn't write on my manuscript anymore, and that was the end of that. Because I hadn't even given it to my editor yet, and you really want your editor as the person that you can only want in TV. You have a million voices in your head. You have a million people giving notes, but in the beauty of publishing novels is that it's just really you and your editor. And that's like a pretty important relationship. And I didn't want anything to sort of interfere with that.
That's totally understandable. So I'm going to start with Matt. Matt, when you sit down and write a book, and I know you've written books on spec, how many of us have written books on spec without, having a contract? For right. So in your opinion, what does it take for you to sit down and say, I'm so committed to this that I'm going to get, and Matt is we know, let me just say this, except for Megan and Chris, Tom and Charles and Matt and I and another writer named Mike Wiley during the pandemic did a Zoom call every Monday night, in which we talk writing and what we were streaming, and how we were getting through the pandemic. So that's why I know these guys so well. And Megan and Chris, obviously, it's a really interesting relationship between editor and writer. And Megan and I have known each other a long time. But to sit down, what does it take for you to sit down and get up at 5 a.m, which I know you're a very early morning writer, and say, I'm going to write this 80,000 word book that no one may ever read other than you?
I have a kernel of an idea. That's all I ever have. In television, as Tom and Megan know, you have to outline. There's this whole process. It's too boring to go through, but it goes through so many drafts of so many, and the short part of it is that outlines get fussed over and fussed over and fussed over, and then the writer goes and writes a script that is true to that outline. At least in the comedy world, this was my experience, and 99% of those scripts stunk because what happened, the part of your brain you use to write an outline is very different than how people behave in real life. So if you create real feeling characters who behave consistently, they don't fit in that outline all the time. And if you're ever watching something or reading a book and the character says, well, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's because they're acting totally out of character. They were hammered into place to fit into that outline. So I don't outline when I write books. I have a notion, and I sit down and I go with it. If I hadn't worked on over 500 episodes of TV, I don't think I'd be able to do that because I just eventually learned how to tell a story. That was the last thing that came to me, as opposed to character and dialogue. But I just have to be excited enough, and then I hope that the craft takes over.
And that's with no net, right? You're willing
No
to do
net.
it. And Megan, is that true for you? I mean, if you're excited enough, I mean, I know you generally now have a contract for at least a book ahead,
Yeah.
but you know, when it wasn't always true. So what did it take for you to do
The
that?
first novel, I had
Die a little?
Yeah, I had no idea anyone would ever read it for me. But
Well, at least I read it.
Yeah. Well, I then many people had, but no, I didn't know I would sell. I didn't know how you sold a book. I didn't know how you got an agent. You know, and I didn't know any of that stuff. But I was having fun. That's the true thing. It's really the only thing you have full control over in one's life, and even the bad days are the best. So.
And Charles, I can't wait for your answer to this one.
Well, I'm one of those like you. I don't plot anything out. I don't know what's going to happen in the next sentence. And the reason it works for me is I want to know what's going to happen. So I write to find out what's going to happen. And and usually, Reed has read a bunch of my books, and he's pointed out certain things that I knew I was doing, but I didn't know it was apparent sometimes. So there are a lot of loose ends in a lot of my books, and they're purposeful. It's not because I ran out of how to finish this or I just think that's the way life is. Like not every question is answered.
Yeah, in fact, if you read Charles's books, one of the things I think is great about them is you have more questions at the end than you do when you start.
Well, I have one of the Swan books where you don't know what the crime is till halfway through the book, and by the time you finish the book, you're not even sure there was a crime. And so to talk about, I write for myself. I don't even think about who's gonna, because I don't even know if anyone's gonna read it. So for me, that's what I do.
So Tom, you've written books on spec. So what does it take for you to do that?
Yeah, I would say in hindsight, a lot of the ideas, and that's the whole thing too, is you have to decide, okay, is this how I want to spend the next X number of months of my life? When I say, yes, I'm going to do this. Most of the ideas in hindsight, I think are plot, but I've found that the richness and the excitement of writing the book is all about the characters and the relationships. And especially when you run into a snag in where you're going, the best answer is always to try to answer it with character, to try to find a solution that is involved with the relationship that is on story, but to really, really go with your people, because that's where your reader is going to be most invested. And if they aren't, you're in trouble.
Megan, do you think about your audience when you write, or do you think about entertaining yourself? I'm going to ask everybody this, but
I don't think about I think about a reader in my head, which is just somebody reading it. I don't think about an audience or the people that have read my prior books. I certainly don't think about what's selling now. That feels lethal to me as a writer. So I really think about maybe my most generous reader, who will come with me on this journey, and I want to keep the reader coming along. That's sort of how I think about it.
Matt?
Yeah, I don't think about the audience. I agree with everything Megan just said. First of all, if you're trying to chase something that's popular, that's almost always a death sentence. And readers are so different. I mean, whatever your favorite thing is, your favorite book or TV show or movie, I guarantee you there's someone in this room who hates it, and vice versa. So you really have to just trust your own instinct, and some people will like it and some people might not.
Charles?
Well, first of all, I don't think of myself as having an audience. I don't think that anyone, if you ask me, I have no idea.
You can always count on Charles.
Yeah,
by the way.
who reads. So I don't have that, and there's a certain lifting of a burden if you have that, and also writing on spec is the only one I have to please while I'm writing is me. And so there's a freedom in that that I don't have. It's how the story, and I totally agree with you, Tom. People don't remember plots of things, but they sure remember characters. And for me, that's the first thing I think of is the character. And because that's who, and I really get upset when not Chris, but some editors or agents or whatever would say, I don't like that character. And I'd say to them, I don't care if you like the character or not. I just want you to find the character interesting enough that you'll, stick with him or her for 250, 300 pages. So for me, character is the most, all my books, I would say, were character driven.
You there at the end.
That would be I.
It's been so long. I
Yes.
forgot your name.
I was listening to Megan's answer about the reader or being a vast audience or an individual, and I was reminded of a fellow you may have heard of named John Steinbeck, who once said that don't think of a big audience because it'll be too intimidating. It'll drive you crazy. Now, I would like to take this group with me to sit in my writer's office, but you wouldn't fit. But I think of an idealized single reader to the point that, and I know I'm going to sound like I'm on a high horse, but I will be. I believe that it's important as an author to be the reader advocate. I think you need to say constantly to yourself, for this person who bought the book and is investing all of this time to sit down and read it, is this going to satisfy them? Are they going to say, oh, come on? You need to be constantly having that little ping go out to whoever you see as your reader, saying, I got to live up to it for them.
So, Chris, one of the things I think authors think about a lot is chase what almost everybody brought up, chasing something. Do editors and publishers say, wait, that worked, we want to be first to be second in line?
That's a very good question because
It's about time I asked a good one.
it's a good question because I know how to answer it, I think. I think that there are some editors and some publishers who want to be the first one out of the gate with a particular thing. There are other publishers or divisions of publishers where it's okay if they're the second, third, and fourth one out of the gate. Like, oh, wow, legal thrillers are big. And I think this was probably also, I can think of it in terms of when mass market publishing, which is going the way of the dodo now, but it was a good way, like Berkeley would publish a ton of stuff that was following a trend. And so I think it really depends on what the company's goal is to a certain extent, or maybe an editor's capacity for not being the first. But, you said before, mystery writing, it's not all one thing, that there's a lot of different divisions within that. And I think that there's a lot of variations, but there's also all kinds of interesting twists and turns that, maybe a book started out as like the second, third, or fourth in a long line of something, but then becomes something totally its own.
Yeah, well, I think what I'm referring to is Gone Girl, Girl on the Train,
Right,
Girl at the
right,
Window,
right.
Girl at the Bungalow Colony in
Right,
the Catskills,
right.
Right,
And it's hard to ignore, like, if something is having success, it's very normal for people to want more of the thing that they liked.
Yeah.
But then it's always a question of when, the audience is going to decide I've had enough of this and I need something different.
So I'm going to ask these guys one more question, and then when everybody's done answering, I'd like to hear your questions, and you better have some.
And they better be good.
And they better be good. And Chris will be the judge if they're good questions, or she'll edit you out. So starting with Tom.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Oh, wait, I changed my mind. A book or an author or something that you found inspirational that you know, that either for comedy writing or for mystery writing or anything, you said, this is it. I mean, this is, you know, something, a book or a moment, anything that sparked in you.
Can it be a jump ball? Can I do
Absolutely.
two? A Perfect Spy by John le Carré, and The End of the Affair by Graham Greene. Two. I mean, there are many I could cite. We all have favorite books, but when you talk about something that has the guts of genre, but is so wide open to an audience and universal experiences and make you feel, those two are the high standard.
Charles?
For me, the people who I know who stick with writing and keep writing no matter what, those are the heroes to me. But as far as, I know this is going to, as far as inspiration, two books really. Lolita, Nabokov's Lolita. I know I'm going to sound like a pervert. And because it's so rich and there's so much in it. And you know, think about it, it's a crime novel, really. You know, it's this sleazy guy who is a pedophile and takes her across state lines.
And becomes president.
Yes, you are
I'm
sounding like a
sorry,
pervert.
Yeah.
No.
And the second one was when I was maybe in my late teens. I read The Naked and the Dead by Norman Mailer. And the book is so old, I'm not going to worry about spoilers for you guys. But the main character, Lieutenant Hearn, is killed halfway through the book. And I thought, oh my God, you can do this. You can take, because I was so upset as the reader, I thought, wow, you can, it's brave, but of course he's trying to show what war is like, you know, that anything can happen. But how brave that is, and that you can take chances in writing. Some of them will work and some of them won't. So those are the two books for me, and two writers that really were inspiring to me.
Chris, you get to answer this.
Oh, that's hard. I have so many favorites. And
Where It Hurts by Reed.
Where It Hurts by Reed Farrel Coleman. A lot of it depends on
Pick, you know,
when in my life I read it. I confess to loving Laura Ingalls Wilder when I was a kid. I know there's been a lot written now about the wrongness.
Your
of the whole
memories
thing.
don't have to be politically correct.
Right.
Okay,
But
yes.
I can still, I haven't read that first book in years, but I can still remember certain lines like I just read it. And I love the book News of the World. I don't know, I found that so eye-opening and gritty, but also so deeply, deeply touching. Sometimes to a fault, I often see a love story in a book where you might not see one, and that is a good example of that situation.
Abbott.
Donna Tartt's Secret History.
Mm.
I
Oh
read
my
it
God,
when I
that
was
book.
20, and it's never left me. I've returned to it many times. That would be the one for me.
Oh, I love that book so much. I've read that twice. Crime fiction too.
Yes,
Anyway,
exactly.
well, the writer who made me want to be a writer, even though I'm not a sci-fi person at all, is Kurt Vonnegut. And it was just because it was plain language and brilliantly funny, frighteningly human. That's who made me want to be a writer. But the writer who made me want to be a crime writer is Chandler. Because when I was reading all those books, thinking I was going to work on a drama TV show, when I read Chandler and Philip Marlowe's narration of a story with this wry social observation and very funny lines, this character, like you were with that character, that's the writer who made me think. I'm not comparing myself to Chandler at all, but I've developed this voice writing comedy. Watch it, pal. And so I know how I can use my voice the way that he's using his voice. I mean, again, I'm not comparing myself, but it just kind of opened my eyes.
Like Matt, it's funny. My answer would almost be exactly the same because I was not a crime fiction reader at all. To me, and people who've heard me speak before have heard the story. I always thought crime fiction were the cheesy books on my dad's nightstand with the lurid covers of half-naked women holding guns, and so I wasn't very interested in reading that. I read Vonnegut. I read a lot of sci-fi. I love Vonnegut. But I'll do this as quickly as possible. I took a night class at Brooklyn College called American Detective Fiction simply because it fit my schedule and I wanted to kill some time. And it wasn't a writing class, it was just a survey class. And the first 3 books we read were The Continental Op by Dashiell Hammett, The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett, and Farewell, My Lovely. And my wife can attest to this. When I came home the night we were done discussing Farewell, My Lovely, I asked her if it was okay with her if I quit my job because I can do this. 2.5 years later, my first long piece of fiction, though my professors would disagree, since every term paper I wrote was my first long piece of fiction, was published as my first novel. So Raymond Chandler would be my answer. And so I, unlike Matt, I will confess I tried to imitate his voice. And I don't do it anymore, but I did start out that way because I didn't have enough confidence in my own voice to do it. So I did it in his voice. So now questions from the audience. Do we have a microphone where we can go to the person in the audience? Otherwise, I'll just repeat the question. Okay, so why don't you take mine, and I'll share with.
It's got a string on it.
Okay. Well, Megan asked to go, so you can't ask her any questions.
Sorry.
You can ask her, and I'll answer for her. Bye, Megan.
Bye. Bye, Megan.
I don't think these travel, by the way, so yeah. Oh, good. Okay, questions? And it doesn't have to be about our books. It could be about mystery writing or writing in general. Or you can ask Chris if she'll look at your manuscript.
By the way, how many are finding that Reed is doing an excellent job as a moderator, making it nice and conversational and giving us all a chance to be ourselves?
Yes.
Yes.
Questions? Come on, somebody. Sit down.
Hi.
That's enough. No.
Yeah.
So, outside of a deadline, how do you know when your book is done?
How do you know? Tom, why don't you start?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
How do you know when your book is done?
You know, when I have to send it.
That's a good question.
Seriously, I mean, Matt, it's TV again. You rewrite until it gets shot, and that's really the way it is with books. When I think I'm done, I get, oh yeah, and then I'll play with it. It's up to the point I can't anymore.
Matt?
It's just a feeling I get that it's done, and that's like most of us. I mean, Megan talked about it. There are some people who probably read it before it gets to our editor. So I will get. There is a point I'll do 2 or 3 drafts for me, and then I will let my wife read it, and then I'll get her thoughts, and she's very good at finding typos, which I am not good at. And then I'll send it to my agent and get her thoughts, and then I go through the whole process with my editor. So I guess it's done when it gets printed, and sometimes it's not even done then because sometimes a typo will squeak through or some other kind of error And then if you're lucky enough to get a second printing, you can fix it in that.
For me, I just know, I just feel that it's done. Now, editors have, I think Chris might have said, you know, in the past, because we did 8 books together, you know, maybe you need to add this, or I know that on Where It Hurts, you had very little editing to do, but on the Parker books, there was not a ton of editing to do. So there's what I think it's done, and then there's when the editor thinks it's done. They're different things. But generally, I have I've published 31 novels, so I have a pretty good sense of when a book is done. Well, that's my answer. Charles?
I'll be a wise ass when I get to the last page, it's done. But it's either when I get sick of it, or I know that it's not going to get any better if I keep doing it. And I've also never had a problem knowing when a book is done, at least from my perspective. It just, I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish the best I can accomplish it. So.
Now, from the editor's point of view.
I think what you said is valuable when you said when you get sick of it, because I've worked with people who, like, they send it in and that's the last time they want to look at it or
Robert B. Parker.
And then there are people who will fiddle with it until the last possible moment. And while we would always want authors to be happy with their work, there is a point at which you just have to say, it's not going to make a difference. And you don't want to make them feel like their desires are trivial or the changes they want to make are unimportant, but sometimes there is a point of diminishing returns. And one of the things that I was always very worried about is sometimes people would want to make these big, long insertions because they had a change of heart about something, which would then go on to create a sort of rolling series of unfortunate events, because it would just create errors further down the line.
Just sort of the opposite of what you had me do with that book.
And I felt like whenever you really wanted to make a change, to keep it as simple as possible to avoid doing just that, like making problems that will occur later on, that, you know, we might not be able to fix because you're just getting further along in the production process. But as the editor, you know, well, Bob Parker was the one who said, like, a book should only be as long as it needs to be, which doesn't really answer the question for most people. But I think it's okay for an author to say, I think it's done, but I'm not sure. And that if they have a good relationship with their editor, that together you can kind of come to that conclusion, you know? Like I can say, yeah, you're right. I think it's all there, but sometimes it's not. And then you're kind of relying on your relationship to say, well, what does it need? I think it needs this. What do you think? But again, I would never think of suggesting huge wholesale changes, because then you're trying to make it something that it's not. And that's not a good idea either.
You know, I teach writing, and I see that's one of the big mistakes is people who can't just abandon the work or say it's not going to get any better, because it really will get worse if you keep writing it. Because the truth, I once had this crazy idea is that if we took one book of ours and went back and every 5 years rewrote that book, it would be a good, you know, is it going to get any better? Maybe, but it might be that you got it right the first time. So it's a really good question and a hard question to answer to me, because we don't know.
Tom?
I had a unique experience with the last book that I did, in that I was the narrator of the audiobook, and I'd never done that before. It's the one you were holding up over there. And so for 4 days, from 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, I would go in a studio with one of these in front of me and have my book on an iPad in front of me, and I would read the book. And I can't tell you how many times I would come to a passage and say, oh, I wish I could. There was nothing that I hated in the book, but it was like, oh, I wish I could have said that a little better, or if I'd left this word out, it would have been a more powerful sentence. You know, I was editing while I was reading. It was a very strange way to go back to it months later.
You know, I almost always, if I have to do a reading, I will never do it from a book that's finished. For that very reason, because I'll see all the mistakes and how I would do it differently. And psychologically, if I'm reading from a manuscript, I think, oh, I can change this. I totally get what you mean. And by the way, that's my idea of hell, is having to read my book aloud.
Oh. You know what? It was fun. I liked it.
Any other questions? Up front. This is Reed's Row, by the way. Right. Yeah.
What is your writing process? Do you get up in the morning and write?
Well,
Do
I
you
hope I
write
get up in the morning.
Do you write in the afternoon? Do you write when it moves you? Do you write all day?
Well, I studied poetry, and for poetry, inspiration's a good idea. For writing 31 novels, actually I've written almost 40 novels, inspiration is not a good thing, because if you wait for inspiration, it's going to take my whole career to write one book. So Hank Philippi Ryan, I don't know if you know her. She's an author and also an investigative reporter in Boston for one of the affiliates. Always says she only writes when she's inspired and makes sure to be inspired at 8 o'clock every morning when she gets up. And that's kind of my thing. The process, the routine is what gets you through. I mean, I'm a morning writer, and if I'm not writing, I'm not happy. So,
Yeah. I'm mostly a morning writer because I had a day job, which was also being a writer, but in TV for the first few books. So I started writing very early. I go by word count, not by time or pages, because word count doesn't lie. And I do it 7 days a week. Otherwise, I lose the thread of the story. And I treat it like a regular job. Everybody has jobs they don't want to go to someday, but you still got to go. So that's what I do. Yeah.
Charles.
I'm the most undisciplined writer ever. I don't have a time when I write. I write when I feel guilty that I haven't written in a while. I can go days, I can go weeks. The only thing that saved me is that I'm an extremely fast typist. I can type 90 words a minute. And when I sit down at the computer, I used to be the typewriter, I can focus really well. But I have no routine in terms. I would like to. I think it's much better. I have
It's not too late.
Yeah, it is too late. I have a friend like Reed who every 9 to 12 every morning, he locks himself in a room, and whether he writes or not, he does not come out of that room. And so I wish I were more disciplined.
I keep regular hours in the morning usually, best after a run, because I have the kind of like, oh, feeling. But truth be told, I'm one of those people, you know, I love writing. I don't just do it, I love it. And I would do it all day into the night, and sometimes do. I always...
Are you doing it right now?
I always have my little notebook. So like when I'm on the ferry coming here, or, you know, whatever, I'm always a man at work, you know. So
I used to have one of those. Then they invented these.
Well, you know, I found the stone tablets a little too hard to take around, so.
Tom's first book was written in runes. Any other questions?
I'm sorry? The Rookie? No. The hell with that show. No,
he didn't write the show.
I did not
just
write the
wrote
show.
book.
Right.
But
Yeah,
he didn't
but
write
the-
for the show. He didn't write for the show.
No, I was in it once, but because they just said they wanted to have me on it for some
Then
reason.
they canceled it immediately.
Yeah. But yeah, in fact, I didn't novelize the show. One of the things when I first had the conversation about doing it was that I said when I met with the creator and the executive producer of the show, I said, who's a great friend of mine now after all these years, I said, I don't want to novelize the stuff you've already done. What I'd like to do is take what you've done and twist it a little bit. Instead of having it be what happened on the show, I'd like to have it be Richard Castle's idealized version of how he's the hero in that show, whether he is or not. You know, like what Matt said about people with their failings and selfishness. There's a lot of the humor in the books comes from his selfishness coming really to the top. So, but I never wrote for the TV show. They used some of the stuff I wrote into the show the other way, but no.
One more question. One more. I think she had her hand up first.
I'm dyslexic and I can't read, so I listen to audiobooks all the time. And I was wondering if you get to pick the reader, because to me, that has so much to do with the characters and if I like the book.
Straw did. He picked himself.
Well, you know,
it depends on how your publisher feels
Right,
about you.
yeah.
Yeah, I have veto power. I've written 13 novels, and I still have way more experience working with actors when I wrote and produced television. So I feel I'm very persnickety, and I agree with you that narrator makes all the difference. So I have contractual veto power.
Yeah, I had input.
Usually what we would do at
Since
Putnam
Sam-
is,
since-
unless somebody has approval, we would usually be able to give authors a selection of potential readers. And it was really nice. You could just send them a clip, an audio file, and they could listen. I mean, and very rarely did someone not find
Well,
someone that they liked.
I just
this-
got one of those yesterday.
I actually I hated the guy who did Where It Hurts and complained, and you guys changed it.
Right.
to-
To Keith, who's a friend of mine.
Well, we try to take, the other thing is we really, although it may seem not to be the case, but publishers do listen to reader feedback, especially since there's a lot of ways to get feedback now. And if people really object to, a reader, especially when an author has a big following with their audiobooks, we don't want to lose those people. We want them to be happy with the book, and, short of a former reader having passed away or something, which has happened, you'd like to try to maintain a relationship so that you're satisfying the people who consume audiobooks rather than the physical book.
Well, on behalf of my friends, Tom, Charles, Chris, the absent,
Megan absent.
and Matt, and myself, I'd like to thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.